Okay, here we go again. Welcome to the Otherppl Show, a weekly program featuring in-depth conversations with today's leading writers. It's a books and culture podcast. I am Brad Listi, and I'm in Los Angeles. Thank you for being here. I have a special episode for you today. My guest is Emily Witt, and this episode is coming out of sequence. It's out of my usual schedule, but it's an episode that I feel like I need to do because I feel absurd posting ordinary episodes about like the latest in contemporary literature with all that is going on in this country right now. I feel like I need to at least make an attempt to address what has been happening in Minnesota. And so I reached out to Emily Witt. She has been a staff writer at The New Yorker magazine since 2018, covering breaking news and politics from around the country. She is also the author of several books, including Future Sex, Nollywood, and a memoir called Health and Safety, which received the LA Times Christopher Isherwood Prize for autobiographical prose back in 2025. I spoke with Emily Witt about health and safety. I believe it was in 2025, maybe 2024, but it wasn't that long ago. I loved that book, and I'm a great admirer of her work as a journalist. Emily is a native of the Twin Cities, and she has been on the ground in Minneapolis covering the ICE raids, the citizen response, the murders of Rene and Alex Pretti, and the shooting of Julio Cesar Sosa-Celis, who is maybe less well known. He was shot in the leg. He survived, but another person in Minneapolis who was shot by an ICE agent during this very tumultuous period in American history that has everybody I know on edge and everybody I know in a state of outrage and deep concern and exhaustion. And there's a lot of emotional trauma. I mean, watching these videos unfold on your phone or on your computer screen, just one after the other, this is not something we should be getting used to. And I think we know that. And yet they keep coming. And my feeling is enough. And I don't think I'm alone in that. And I also have to say, I've had that feeling before. This is not the first time, to say the least, that I've had that feeling of enough. But I'm really hoping that this time is different because what is happening in Minneapolis cannot continue, and it cannot spread. It's intolerable, and it's deeply wrong. So I wanted to do an episode about it, and I can't think of a better person with whom to speak about this place and what has been going on than Emily Witt, who grew up there, who knows Minneapolis very well, and who is just a superb journalist. So I'm going to share that conversation with all of you right now. I think it's useful to hear from somebody who is there. She spoke to me from her hotel room in Minneapolis. I want to say it's warmed up in Minneapolis since the big protest and the general strike of a few days ago. I think it's now 14 degrees in Minneapolis, like the absolute coldest days of the coldest winter in this country. I mean, I think she says in this piece that she wrote for The New Yorker magazine entitled The Battle for Minneapolis, that winter everywhere else in the country seems fake by comparison. And the fact that there have been all of these people out in the streets standing up in protest and saying no, and all of these people looking out for one another and trying to protect their city and the civic integrity of the place that they live has been deeply inspiring. You have to give enormous credit to the people of Minneapolis and to the people of Minnesota for how they have responded, the way that they have organized, the way that they have affected mutual aid. It's been really heartening to see. And it's an example for the rest of us in many, many ways. So let's get to the conversation with Emily about all that has been happening as we try to kind of make sense of it. And we try to figure out like what it means for the rest of us and how we move forward. Here I am with Emily Witt.
And so I hesitated on, I believe, January 7th when Rene Good was killed and it was clear somebody would need to write something. I don't know. I kind of short-circuited at first, even though Minneapolis is my hometown and I've been I covered ICE in LA, ICE's presence in LA. I just kind of, I had a moment of hesitation, and another writer happened to be in the Midwest somewhere, Tammy Kim, who's awesome. So she came here and published an article in the immediate aftermath. But as it was clear that things were only going to get worse, they asked me to come. And at that point, I'd had a moment to process my own, intense response to it. And I felt able to come and face the thing. And so I got here about, I guess, the day of the second shooting that happened. So that was January 14th. I arrived thinking things, if they might not taper off, might not be as violent. And then within a few hours of arriving, there was news on social media that somebody else had been shot, in this case in the leg, Julio Cesar-Celis in North Minneapolis. And so, I was getting my bearings, eating a burger, and then ran up to North Minneapolis and just immediately encountered people there to, observe what had happened and express their discontent, facing off with federal agents who were lobbing tear gas canisters and flashbang crowd deterrence. And so that was my first night here. But it was surprisingly, honestly, that night was illuminated immediately some things that are unique to this situation. And one is that the people out there observing or demonstrating or protesting, whatever you want to call it, are not trying to cause chaos. They're really centered and calm. They might be yelling but they're, compared to what I'd seen in Los Angeles in June, those huge protests downtown, people here were very, they weren't trying to start confrontation not that the people in LA were either, but it was pretty measured scene. The chaos all came from the federal agents. And the other thing that was immediately remarkable was pretty much no cops. I did not see any cops, like local Minneapolis Police Department police officers. And again, in contrast with in LA, where the police were in every protest there to disperse the crowd. They were the ones throwing the tear gas and everything else. Here, the Minneapolis police are kind of taking a stance of non-intervention.
So for people on the outside looking in, just to try to get a sense of what it's like to be on the ground in Minneapolis at this time, obviously these confrontations and these protests are happening in pockets, but if you're moving around the city, how present is it? Like if you're driving 5 miles across town, are you going to see something everywhere you go? Or is it just you find out where something is over social media or via text, and then you drive to it and then you find it? I'm just trying to get a sense for what it feels like to be there.
No, I think I think that first week before I arrived, there was a lot of activity by ICE agents. And so it was possible that you'd be driving around and you would hear honking and whistling. And, there was always the likelihood of an encounter with them, but not like an automatic, you'd see, if you drove around for an hour, you'd automatically see them. But when you look at the map or when you do get the alerts of where they are, for me in this couple weeks that I've been here, it's like, oh, that was next to that hotel I was at last week, or I had dinner there last night. I mean, Alex Pretti was killed on a block of Minneapolis where, I mean, I'd had dinner there like 3 times. It's like a kind of little restaurant zone. It's like a junction, like a kind of place. And I don't know, there's like a bar I like there. So I had been there 4 times, I think. I think I parked my car one night, like directly in front of the place where he was killed. So it is just like where you're at and when it goes down.
How far from all this did you grow up? I'm trying to place you as a child because this is your hometown. And a lot of the protesting, like the big protesting, has happened downtown, correct?
No. Well, I mean, I think one of the things that there have been protests, but what marks the resistance here is not protest, actually. It's a different kind of situation. And I can explain that. But I grew up in a neighborhood called Bryn Mawr. It's kind of like the first block of South Minneapolis. It's just about a mile west of downtown Minneapolis. But at the time in Minneapolis, they really bussed people around for school. So I always went to school I went to Barton Elementary. For people listening that are local, I went to Barton Elementary School and I graduated from South High School. So where I went to high school and where I hung out, or my friends were, it's these streets. It's this very Rene Good, George Floyd, and Alex Pretti were all killed within a couple miles of each other on the south side of Minneapolis, which is just astonishing to think about. And so there are areas that I know, that I have very clear memories of, childhood memories of, and there are areas that are just residential neighborhoods. Where Rene Good was killed, I would kind of describe that as like maybe a little bit of like a millennial starter home neighborhood. So a lot of people my age that I grew up with live there. The state rep for that neighborhood I went to high school with, it's a lot of families with young kids and it's an area with a strong tradition of being civic minded and leftist politics for sure. And yeah, like kind of a little bit of a hippie, like enclave, sort of. I don't know if that's the right word, but like there's the Mayday Cafe where that's like the woman-owned cooperative coffee shop. It's like a lot of stuff like that. And that's very Minneapolis and very, specific to that neighborhood. Yeah.
So this is traumatic for millions and millions of Americans, people around the world. I mean, just to watch this stuff, most of us, it's very disturbing how seeing murders unfold on video has become normal. You're just like, oh yeah,
it's horrifying.
It's horrifying. And so, I'm certainly shaken by it and angered by it and exhausted by it. But I'm wondering, like, as a journalist, somebody who's there like on business to do her job, but has also got so many personal ties, like, how do you navigate the emotional content of all this? Do you even have a sense for how this is affecting you?
I don't. I've had some really weird emotional outbursts and stuff. I'm not going to lie. In the last, I think I mean, first of all, just my initial hesitation to come and write about it is inexplicable to me. Like, this is what I do. And yet I couldn't bear the thought of doing it for a few days or something. Something happened. And then when I did get here and I heard that someone had been shot again, and I went up to North Minneapolis where that shooting took place, and there was just tear gas in the air, and I the weather, like, I had not expected to need to run out and stand in the street for 2 hours and whatever it was, 14 degrees. And like, I'd brought warm clothes, but I didn't have them on me. And so it's just, the weather and was so intense. But really, I guess what struck me in that moment was, I don't think I ever saw tear gas in an American city before 2020, like my whole life. I'm in my mid 40s, and now I'm like blasé about it. Whereas, the first time I saw law enforcement, like, spraying tear gas at people, I was like horrified and shocked. And now I'm just like, oh man, there's tear gas. Ugh, like
again.
and that disturbed me, like, that my pulse didn't race when I went there. That upset me in some way, or things that I would have felt compelled, like, to just, I don't know, immediately start writing with this urgency. I was having trouble getting in that state of mind, like, oh, this is not normal. Like, I got to write about this. Like, and I definitely got there over the next few days, but it was just, I was really disturbed by that a little.
Yeah, I mean, on a much smaller and less consequential scale, after Alex Pretti was killed and his parents issued that statement, I was so angry. I felt compelled to share their statement because so much misinformation was being spread around, and he was being mischaracterized by people in the government, and it was pissing me off. And so I shared their statement as like it's like a visual on Instagram. And I was trying to write a caption, like to kind of share my thoughts or whatever, or express some kind of condolence. And I struggled with what to say. And then I finally was like, just make sure every sentence is a fact, or like is factual, which I guess is the work of a journalist. You're reporting from the field. You're trying to make sure that you're being accurate, right? And as I kind of wrote this little tiny paragraph and stacked the sentences up, it was like, yeah, like you don't need to. It's all so insane. And as long as you're just like declaratively writing down what happened, and I guess to some extent how I feel, that's enough. You don't need to add much. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, I realized, my story came out the day after Alex Pretti was killed. And so most of it had been written, and then that happened. I'd actually gone back to New York. So I flew back to Minneapolis that night, like beating the snowstorm that hit New York. And just had to write a couple of paragraphs. And even this morning when I woke up, the story came out yesterday. This morning, I was like, oh, I really wish I'd like written that differently. Like I gave DHS some space, I guess. The Department of Homeland Security, and like, I don't know, but at the same time, it's like, if you give them space, they just show you over and over how evil they are. So maybe, like you're saying, like, if you list the facts and then you list their response, I don't know, like, it's been very difficult for me being from here and knowing who's out here doing the work of maintaining our constitutional rights, to listen to them be slandered by every single Trump official, being called agitators, being called paid professionals,
domestic terrorists.
They called Alex Pretti a domestic terrorist. Like, shame on them. And truly, and like, you know, I guess a lot of people believe that, you know, and we're talking about people that's like, you know, the friends I grew up with, like their moms are out, like people in their 70s and even 80s are out. Like, it is not, I don't know. It's just really difficult it's just been difficult. Yeah. It's just unbelievable how the rhetoric against it. I mean, you know, like there's this term that sociologists use, right? Like DARVO. Have you heard of that?
Yes,
it's an acronym. It stands for deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender.
Right.
And that's their playbook. Like, especially the reversing victim and offender part, every single time. And they all fall in line. And I really have to wonder whether they believe it. I think they do. I mean, just judging on how the agents have behaved here and the impression they seem to have that the people that are there to monitor them are somehow, like, again, like terrorists or something. Like, they must believe their own propaganda. But I just, it's like really hard to wrap your head around.
Yeah. I mean, I think some of them do. I think there are a good many who know better, but who are going along and who are privately, I don't know. I like to believe they're privately struggling with what they're up to, but maybe I'm wrong. And, you know, I have a lot of people in my life who have, like via text or whatever, expressed like great admiration, and on social media, of course, like great admiration for the people of Minnesota. The citizens in the streets have put up an amazing fight and have been very organized. And a lot of the videos that I'm seeing where people are kind of pouring their hearts out, it's very moving. And there's just so much goodness. You know, it's that I grew up in Wisconsin. These people, I think we talked about this the last time you were on the show. It's culturally very similar, Wisconsin and Minnesota. Like they're kind of sibling states or whatever. And so this is just very recognizable to me. And in this cold, I mean, this is the coldest, these are the coldest days of the winter that all of this is unfolding. And there are tens of thousands of people out in the streets, and they're being tear gassed and thrown to the ground and, you know, all this different stuff. And I think it's worth talking about why ICE would go to Minnesota at this time of the year in such numbers. I believe in your article, you say there's a couple thousand ICE agents on the ground?
DHS says there are 3,000, or that's the number they've been.
And I think you say there's 600, roughly 600 officers in the Minneapolis Police Department, just to kind of give like an idea of ratio. So that's an outsized presence, to say the least, of ICE agents on the ground in Minneapolis or in Minnesota, trying to, you know, grab people and throw them into detention centers or God knows where. Why? Why Minnesota? And why, why are so many people in Minnesota standing up in such a strong and coordinated way?
Right. Yeah. There's two sides of that question. So the first would be why is the Trump administration targeting Minnesota? And, you know, I can only guess, but here my guesses would be, you know, Tim Walz was, you know, the vice presidential nominee in the last election for the Democratic Party. So he's like a kind of pretty clear political rival. Trump only lost Minnesota by 4 points last election. So, you know, maybe there was a sense for him that he could come here, generate chaos, and and like present his administration as the savior of this messed up place with bad politics or something like that.
I want to actually read something from your article and then have you respond. Mm-hmm. You write, quote, "When you grow up in Minneapolis and then you leave it, two truths become apparent. Winters everywhere else seem fake, and no other city's politics seem as doggedly progressive, not even New York's or Los Angeles's, the Democratic strongholds where I have spent a lot of my adult life." So Minneapolis is different when it comes to its politics. It's the progressives there are truly progressive.
Yeah, there's just this sincerity here that is not, it's not wokeness or whatever, however you would like try to shit talk it. It's a real civic minded concern. There's a lot of commitment here to the public schools, to public parks. Minneapolis is and Hennepin County, the government is like a little bit more like, there's a lot of elected positions here that are not elected in other cities. Like I can't remember the exact name of it, but like taxation and policy, stuff like that, park board, school board, I believe. You might need to run that by a fact check, but it's just really, a really like politically involved place. And, people have attributed that to lots of things, to like Scandinavian heritage, all that stuff, to maybe the weather. I don't know. But it and it's interesting, like when the city erupted in 2020, like, and I wrote this in Health and Safety, and I kind of like doubted myself. I was like, am I romanticizing? Oh, go ahead.
I just want to say Health and Safety is your excellent memoir, which we talked about the last time you were on the show. That's
right. Yeah. And I talk about 2020, and I have a little bit about Minneapolis in there and being from there. And that in 2020, when Minneapolis was the place where all of this tension over police violence and racial injustice erupted in this spectacular way. Like, I remember sitting in New York and watching the 3rd Precinct burn and thinking, not being surprised at all that was the place where things came to a head, like for a lot of different reasons. And when I kind of write about them in the book, but when I wrote that, I was like, am I romanticizing this place? I was just going back and thinking of all the radicalism I was really exposed to in childhood, like in small ways, big ways, like just, reading Angela Davis, reading Howard Zinn, like reading, I don't know, the people I was surrounded by just were very, there's just a lot of radical thought in the air. And it was really like, not from my parents who are from the East Coast. It was very much the city itself. And so when I wrote that in Health and Safety, I doubted myself. I was like, am I imagining this? Like, am I just romanticizing my childhood? And now it's like, no, this place has a different political mindset and a different, and I think what happens when Trump is president, and he was president when everything went down here in 2020, is I keep coming back to this word sincerity, but the sincerity of this place that you don't manipulate, you don't, I don't know, it really, it is the counterfoil, it turns out, to the rhetoric and the, bad faith gestures of the presidential administration kind of meet their limit when you have a group of people that are just like almost like embarrassingly sincere. Like, yeah.
Well, I mean, and also there's also a lot of, there's a lot of white people who are out in the streets. And I saw Tim Snyder the guy who wrote On Tyranny. He's like he's been kind of a talking head on a lot of news shows over the past decade because he's, sort of an authority on this stuff. And he pointed out that the MAGA people, Trump and his people, are targeting Minnesota because it's a blue state with good governance historically. And my wife is from Minneapolis, and so I've spent a lot of time up there, and I've marveled at the parks. And it's so clean. Like, we're up there in the summer and I'm like, should we live here? And like the lakes, it's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. And it's people are so nice. And it's just like, I don't know. That's one element of it. And then I think the other element that I keep hearing people talk about is the fact that it's been historically so welcoming to refugees and has been very willing to accept them. Broadly speaking, I'm sure there are people who haven't been welcoming, of course, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like, Minneapolis is a place that has been a sanctuary and a home for a lot of displaced peoples and people looking to restart somewhere new. And that is at cross purposes with like the entire MAGA project, it seems like.
Yeah. I mean, culturally, the way that works out, or at least kind of like in my memory in Minneapolis, is like, yeah, there's a sense that the people from other countries who have come to Minneapolis and made lives there, like, there's a real pride in, and yeah, I'm not trying to, it's not perfect, obviously, not even close, but, there's just like a pride in being in being a city. Minneapolis is not a coastal city. It doesn't have has a little inferiority complex probably about its like cosmopolitanism and all of that. And so the groups that have come here and made the city more worldly than it was, or there's a lot of pride in those groups of people, and also like a lot of like people get married, they have kids, like there's like those groups are all, it's not like there's like walls between them, and yeah, I think it's just, it is a majority white city, and it has a really, as we saw with George Floyd, it has a very dark history of racial inequality and segregation, actually. But there is also just an aspiration to make the city better, by particularly in the neighborhoods that have been targeted by all of this. And yeah, so like something like the fraud that's been used as a pretext for this, whatever you want to call it, invasion, crackdown. I think people are really sorry that happened. Obviously, they do not think it means like the Somali Americans that live here need to go somewhere else, or.
And can you just you just elaborate a little bit on this fraud scandal? Because I think people maybe outside of Minnesota or who don't have their ear to the ground politically, like, might not even know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so there was a huge scandal here over the past couple of years where Minneapolis has a pretty big social safety net that's a part of its politics. And during the pandemic, some different groups, contractors, defrauded that system and got a lot of money for, to feed children that they weren't feeding, and take care of disabled people that they weren't taking care of, that kind of thing. They were submitting false claims, right? And the money was a significant amount of money. The estimates differ, but at least something, it was in the billions. And in this one group in particular called Feeding Our Future, I think a majority of the people that were ultimately convicted for that were Somali American, but the person that the prosecutors described as the mastermind of that fraud was, like a white American born citizen. But Trump, in his way, and this has been going on for years, this has worked its way through the courts. And then, this right-wing influencer came here and did like kind of claim to find more evidence of it. And so brought it up into the national conversation again. And Trump made it an immigration issue. It wasn't an immigration issue. It wasn't about immigration, like, at all. It's just fraud that was committed here. And by people that happen to be, from a certain community, a lot of the people. And, Somali Americans, like, one thing I'm not even sure the Trump administration understood, like, the vast majority, whether of Somali Americans here in Minnesota and around the country are citizens, like something close to 90%, something like that. And so, like, when Trump suspended temporary protected status for Somalis last month, or I think this month, that only affected like 3,500 people nationwide. Like these are Americans, and the people in Minnesota that did that, like, they're Minnesotans. And so to try to turn it into a thing that deserves an immigration crackdown is just, pure xenophobia and playing into that sentiment and playing into the idea of insider and outsider and trying to exaggerate these cultural divisions. When I think people hear that, first of all, nobody's brought that up to me the entire time. And then the second thing is that's not how that scandal, whatever you want to call it. I think people here really resist any attempt to sort of racialize that scandal or make it into kind of like culturally determined scandal. Fraud happens in many places by many people. But it did cost the governor his political future, he was running for a third term and he dropped out. And it is one of the pretexts that Trump has used to justify this surge here.
So you said you arrived in Minnesota to do this reporting, the day that Julio Cesar Sosa-Celis was shot in the leg on the north side?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then where were you when Alex Pretti was shot again? And can you just describe where you were and what happened after that happened for you?
Yeah, I had gone back to New York City. I was sitting in my kitchen. I was I'd been working really hard to get the story out, and it was now filed and in fact checking, and I was ready to have a weekend catching up with my friends, and was sitting at the kitchen table. And a friend sent me it was probably around 10:30 in the morning. So maybe an hour and a half after the thing happened, and sent me a Reddit video. And I just felt sick to my stomach. I just could not believe what I was witnessing. And I knew I had to go back to Minneapolis. There's like a snowstorm coming in New York. And so I just went into panic mode to try to figure out how to get out of town before that hit. 'Cause I just felt like we were off the map of any known. I don't know. I sent it immediately to David Remnick. I sent it to all my editors at the New Yorker. We all kind of called each other, and it's just what happens now? This was not. It's just, you could tell from the video before there were any details about what happened that there was just something we hadn't seen before. Their sense of impunity, their sense of confidence. And as more videos emerged, pepper spraying in the face, all that kind of stuff. I just felt this really deep dread, because it just, you could see in the video how institutionalized that violence was. And that's terrifying. It's not like it's like some lone wolf assassination or one bad actor or a mistake or a confusing situation, you know. Yeah, as much as they try to make it confusing, it's not confusing.
Well, and you think back, I mean, you mentioned George Floyd, there's Philando Castile, there's obviously Rene Good, but there's many others who, in Minneapolis alone, who have suffered violence at the hands of law enforcement, you know, who have met their end as the result of excessive force. But like you said, with Rene Good and Alex Pretti, and with the way in which these ICE agents are masked and seem to have total impunity, like, you just know the Department of Justice isn't going to touch, like the FBI is not going to look into this. If there's going to be any legal recourse, it's going to happen at the state level. But it just seems like they know they have a free pass to kind of do whatever they want. And on some level, I guess that's been the case in this country, but not with not with a president who's so overt about it, and not with a kind of new group, like a new law enforcement group, or they're like taxpayer funded bounty hunters is a way that I've heard it characterized. It feels kind of like that's what it is, right? And you're seeing also Greg Bovino, is that his name? Like parading around in what is very obviously like it's like Nazi regalia, like the fashion choice. That's not, my eyes are not playing tricks on me. Do you know what I'm saying? They're not even hiding it. Like this guy is dressing, his haircut looks like kind of an SS soldier. And it's just like, what the fuck is going on? Like, that's what feels, these are the pieces of it that make it feel new. Do you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah. And he's interesting, like the photographer I worked with, spent a day sort of, cause he's been very much like on the ground here. So they spent a day like following him around.
What's his name?
And he said, the photographer?
Yeah.
Or Philip Cheung?
His photos that accompany your piece are excellent.
Oh, he's awesome. He's so good. And yeah, he said that it was interesting, like that, there was a day when they went out and they were just like almost like they would like wait for the protest, for the kind of people that were following them to like catch up, to try to like generate as much sort of like media ready confrontational content. Like they could have just like, left, but they wanted, and I don't know if you saw the video, Greg Bovino like lobbing this, canister of gas, this green, he personally was like lobbing, and it was really giving Robert Duvall in Apocalypse Now. Like I was like, it was really giving, like, I love the smell of napalm in the morning, and I don't know how they think this plays and who this plays to. I mean, it must be appealing to somebody, but I don't, looking at those videos of him tossing green gas at like a bunch of Minnesotans in winter coats, like I just don't understand who gets off on that and who thinks that's right.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what I was getting at earlier when you were kind of saying like, this is where they've sort of meet their limit. And I said, well, you're seeing like lots and lots of like suburban Minnesotan people in the streets. To see these videos that are going viral of like the most normie, like Minnesota mom who's like, I couldn't watch this on TV anymore. I had to leave my house in Edina and come down here with my husband, and we just got pepper sprayed. And I mean, you'd have to be really delusional to watch this and not be moved. Do you know what I'm saying? Or to see something nefarious in it. Like do you see what I'm saying? I just feel like there's like a point at which the MAGA movement and what is happening in Minnesota, like it has to be causing at least some of them to second guess themselves. I gotta believe, or no?
I don't know. I don't know, because, the line against that mom in Edina or whatever is that she's a paid professional. And they're really like, insisting that that's true, that they're they're terrorists and they're, or like they're obstructing justice. That's a much more sort of like centrist sounding construction of it. Like if they weren't out there like obstructing these ICE agents, they wouldn't get shot in the face. That line, like you ran a red light. So apparently we can shoot you. But it's not even that. They weren't running red lights. They were exercising a constitutional right to observe and say, fuck you, to whoever you want. And, but I think that's how it's framed, is like, just let ICE, know where, when the president goes on, he's like, this isn't happening in other places. It's only Minneapolis that's causing this problem. And they're being difficult. That's why they're getting punished and killed, and tear gassed and punched in the face and everything else. That's the line. And I, and that's how I've said this before, like, it's obvious that's the logic of fascism, is if you obey every rule, you'll have comfort and safety and protection. And they'll always pull that card, like, this happened to you because you weren't obeying the rule. But the rules are always changing, and the rules, they don't have to follow the rules. We have rules about what they're allowed to do and not do that they're not following. So it's always going to be that. It's always going to be like, oh, he had a weapon. Like, oh, suddenly the right wing cares about concealed carry, like bringing a concealed weapon to a protest. Like, suddenly that's, wait, what?
Yeah, but if Kyle Rittenhouse does it with like an AR-15 or whatever.
With an AR-15, I mean, or who, yeah, it's so obvious it's not worth talking about, but it's like, it's just that idea that you deserve your own, bullying is that's their logic. And again, the people here are just not accepting it,
So I guess a connected question, the question that I'm sort of leading us to is like, do you think that this is a tipping point for the country? Like, I have been waiting for a tipping point since 2016. And I'm at the point where I don't hold my breath, that people are going to wake up, or that we're going to reach some sort of critical mass where people finally realize that this project is bad news and that we're on a very, very dangerous path. But like, do you think there's any chance that what has been unfolding in Minneapolis the past couple of weeks will, in time be viewed as like the tipping point?
I don't know. I don't know. Like, that's really hard to say. Like, I know it's a tipping point here. I mean, this is like a kind of trauma that I think is going to reverberate for a very long time in this city. I mean, assuming voting continues as it has, like, I really have trouble imagining. I mean, I don't know how this is playing statewide, but there's a sense here of just deep disgust.
Well, if that's the case, and you wouldn't, I mean, I don't think I'm surprised to know that Minneapolis is disgusted by what's happening based on its political history. But like, you talked a while ago about how Trump, part of his strategy in bringing ICE to Minneapolis was to sort of create chaos on the ground so that he could be viewed as the conquering hero who comes in and quells the uprising or whatever and restores order. Based on what you've seen and the vibes out there, it seems that strategy has backfired for him, would you say?
Yeah, I think that was just a fundamental misunderstanding of who was protesting in 2020 and what they were upset about, and expecting maybe, I mean, this is purely supposition, but I don't think lightning strikes twice. He was in the same place in the exact same neighborhood with whatever, 3,000 ICE agents. I think he really misunderstood what happened in 2020. And I think he has no understanding of what's happening now and the place that he thought he could provoke into whatever. I don't know. I mean, and that's just a theory, but I don't know. It's not just about immigration, that's for sure. And I mean, Minnesota has something like 100,000 undocumented immigrants, like compared to like every like much bigger states. It's like 2% of the population here. It's like not, if immigration was your thing, this is not the place to mobilize the biggest immigration crackdown in, or one of them in American history. And what's amazing on the ground in Minnesota is or Minneapolis, St. Paul, is like how deep these networks are going. I mean, I talked to somebody today who's just like in the PTA, like the PTA has become like a fully like ICE monitoring.
The PTA meaning
organization.
Parent Teacher Association?
Yeah, like a school. Like, I mean, I don't want to talk about it too much because I might write about it. Like, but other examples of just, like if a business right now, a restaurant in Minneapolis is like, oh, we just want somebody to like keep an eye here when our workers like leave and go home, or like, people here are monitoring school drop-offs. They're monitoring when people get off of work. They're helping drive people because they've been so open about racially profiling, and because Minneapolis is a majority white city, people of color are very vulnerable here if there is racial profiling, as we've seen. Philando Castile had been stopped by police something like, I don't know, dozens of times, So yeah, people are driving people home. They're delivering groceries. It's so organized here. Like I was on the Signal chats in LA in June, and it would be like, oh, ICE is here, ICE is there. Everybody was running around like, here, you log into the neighborhood Signal chat. There's dispatchers that work in shifts. You basically call in on your phone, and there's just like an audio feed. You can run a license plate check of a vehicle. They'll tell you if it's ICE or not. They'll, it's just, people are extremely organized. Like,
and can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
Like, is there a connection that you see between the George Floyd protests of 2020 and the law enforcement response to those protests and the effectiveness of Minnesotans in Minneapolis this time around in terms of how people have learned to organize? Because it does seem like they're a step ahead, and I don't know if that's just like the pluck of Minneapolitans or if it's because there's experience, with this sort of stuff in recent times.
Yeah, I mean, certainly in the neighborhoods where Rene Good was killed, especially because that was very close to where George Floyd was killed. Those neighborhoods in 2020, they organized they have block captains, they have, neighborhood groups, because it was pretty chaotic here then. And people were just kind of, yeah, I think there was a lot of organization in place. I mean, I think around the country from George Floyd. I mean, I think that's true. Like I said, I never saw tear gas until 2020. Like, we've all seen tear gas now. We all know what to wear to a protest. Like, I don't, that was not true. Maybe in the Battle of Seattle, something like that. But I don't think like those protests brought out millions of Americans into the street and they witnessed a state crackdown on them in a way that I don't think very many people of a certain generation had ever seen since the 60s or something, So I think there's that. I also think, nobody said this to me and I might be wrong, but I do think the way that the narrative of that summer and those protests was turned against the left really successfully has made people a lot more cautious. Like, you know, they know Trump right now wants them to play into like a rioting narrative, and there's just I haven't seen a single person even try to be edgy. I mean, beyond like swearing, you know, people are being very as angry as they are, and like, I don't want to people are so angry here, but they're not going to play into the notion that they're hysterical, or, you know what I mean? It's just, it's in the air here. It's so determined. I don't know. I haven't experienced anything like it. It's like, yeah, if you provoke a person that's pretty emotionally regulated into like deep anger, I think this is what it kind of looks like. It's like a kind of, I don't know, just as you've seen in all these videos, people they're not throwing a temper tantrum, but like they're mad.
Well, I mean, Minnesotans are not the most emotionally demonstrative people, broadly speaking. I mean, there's like a kind of I call it like a Scandinavian reserve, or, you know, my wife is Norwegian. I mean, they're very almost like preternaturally even keeled, not yellers. Like my father-in-law couldn't yell. It seemed like, you know what I'm saying? I don't think physically he could yell. Yeah. And so to see Minnesotans out in the streets, there's one video of a guy who's in his 70s, like kind of in a cloud of tear gas. I'm sure you've seen this video.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
And you're just like, that was really remarkable to me, because you just get the sense like this is not a guy who has spent a lot of time out in the streets protesting, or has been out like screaming at law enforcement and expressing anger. Like, but people have had enough. People have had enough. A lot of people anyway.
Yeah. And like, this is a place that really believes in values. It does. It's like sort of, and so then for people on the national stage to call you all kinds of things and claim that those values aren't real, and you're being taken advantage of, and you know, your city's being taken over by migrants or whatever, you know, by like gangs, and it's just like the hubris of telling a city that knows itself and has a really strong sense of itself, like what it's supposed to feel about its own people, is just really like, that's a really, I don't know that you want to do that anywhere in the United States. And, you know, like, it's just a move. And I really would like to think it's a politically wrong-headed move, but we'll see how people respond to all this. I just, yeah.
So in terms of your on the ground work, trying to cover this story, you know, in the piece that you wrote for the New Yorker, you're talking about like kind of doing ride-alongs with activists who are out trying to follow ICE and observe their activity, which is within their legal rights to do. Can you just talk a little bit about how you meet such people, how you got into the car with them, and or kind of in these moments where you're following ICE and then ICE is interacting with the car that you're in, you know, they kind of become aware that they're being trailed. They don't like that. And I'm also curious to know if like you've ever felt unsafe.
Yeah. So I met people, you know, just through friends. I just, you know, I haven't lived in Minneapolis for a long time, but just like reached out to people and my parents don't live here anymore. So I just reached out to like people that still knew people here, and everybody's so involved in everything here. It's just not that hard to, I mean, I think every media outlet in the country's kind of done the same story about like riding along with observers, and, because it really is an extensive network of people out on the streets. And yeah, so ICE, or, you know, ICE, Border Patrol, the federal agents, like know, right? And, one day I was out with a couple of people and they spotted a kind of no nice vehicle, and they started kind of tailing it at a pretty safe distance, like at least a block. And the idea of that is just that you want them to know people are watching. You want them to know that, if they do conduct an operation, like, because these networks are so rapid response, a bunch of people can show up really quickly and at least kind of be like witnessing, recording. And we've seen how powerful those videos have been to shape the narrative of the thing.
Well, I mean, it's just essential because, a couple of like really chilling points that people keep making is that if there's no video, imagine what they would be saying. And then if it is this bad for people we can see, what is it like for people who are in these detention centers? What is happening in places where we can't see and where people can't observe and where people can't take videos?
Yeah, it's really, it's really hard to contemplate. And that's where, we got to do the real journalism, honestly. And, yeah, but as for being scared, I don't know. I don't want to be scared of, I don't want to be scared of my government whose bills I'm paying. Like, I don't want to be, I don't know. They work for us. And they forget that, I think. And we forget that, but they work for us. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know how scared to be. They're trying to scare us for sure. When the car was in, so we were kind of following this agent and like there was some maneuvering and they came around and that's the video I guess I've like kind of sent my friends. I don't want to publish it, but like they kind of come around and roll down their windows and the driver just points at the driver of the car that I'm in. They're masked and they're always like doing the face scanning thing. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting because like I covered this in June in LA. And in LA, you had these massive protests, but the protesters were not really in confrontation with federal agents at all. They were like just doing the usual song and dance of the LAPD, right? And like the National Guard was there, but they were just protecting federal property. They weren't that much in the mix. And so the street response in LA was not what we're seeing in Minneapolis, where it really is like there's no police involved in this. Like really they're not there. So it feels very different. And but to go back to LA, like in June, so I covered the protests, but then I realized that the ICE agents were really all like most of the sightings that I was hearing about were like in Eastern LA County and like these cities like Bellflower and like, so I was like driving around trying to find them where they were hitting car washes and snatching people off the streets. And I guess that was the first time that I really felt this dread. Like, and I thought maybe I wondered if I was like being melodramatic, but like, oh, they just gave these people $170 billion. Like, this is going to be the thing. This is going to be, it's not going to be about immigration. Like, this is going to be the force, the armed force that cracks down on dissent. Like, they are the people that are hired. And it felt a little melodramatic. I mean, not really, but I was like, am I being melodramatic to feel this way? I mean, after after LA, I was so upset by writing that story. I almost like, I don't know. I felt a new kind of way. I don't know. And I've covered a lot of bad stuff. And then to just see it play out, like, not only as my worst nightmare, but then also like in my hometown, it's really disturbing. And the only thing that I do feel this sense of hope is how strong the reaction against it has been. I mean, I don't, if there was just nothing, I don't know, like, but people I still just can't believe that a mom from Medina has to like be out in the streets like this. But it's like, I mean, that's what's, and there is a real sense here that they are logging, that they're logging license plates, they're keeping track of addresses. Like a common strategy with the federal agents is when they see somebody following them, they'll lead the car to the observer zone address just to show that they've like run their plate. They know who they are. They have their name.
So wait. So you'll be in an observer's car following an ICE SUV, and the ICE SUV will be meandering around the city, and they'll wind up taking you to your own house just to sort of flex.
To your own house. Yeah. Like there's a state rep, I think, or maybe a state senator. I don't know. Athena Hollins in St. Paul. And that happened to her when she was riding along with Phil, with the photographer I was working with. And other people told me that too. Like, another activist I interviewed for the story said, yeah, they took her on like a tour of all her past residences in Minneapolis. So they're just running your plate. I mean, but it's an intimidation tactic. And yeah, like all the facial scanning and Trump at one point, he seemed to dial this back, but there was some kind of threat at some point that he was going to like reveal, and this just shows how much they're misreading the situation, like reveal who the activists are so that like their places of work and everything knows who they are. And it's like, I don't think a lot of people would get fired for protesting in Minneapolis right now.
They might get a promotion.
I don't think this is like a situation where you're like posting about Charlie Kirk and then you lose your job or something. I don't think there's a lot of stigma right now in Minneapolis about being anti-ICE.
So how long are you in town for? Do you have a sense, like this stint? Are you going to go back to New York? Are you going to stick around?
I'm going to stick around at least till the end of the week. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's, I don't know. It's just, yeah, I guess it took me a while to get into it and like to get my head straight around it and to kind of like, I was having all these weird hang-ups about doing my job that were like, it's like, that now in retrospect, I think is just like, I'm just disturbed. And that was how it kind of came out.
It's emotional. It's your hometown.
Like I was like, I don't want to miss this party in New York. It's like, what? Like, and all of that's gone. But that was like, I was having these weird, like kind of, yeah, these intense situations, I think for a lot of people just produce really strange responses. Like you get hung up on stuff that you're like, has nothing to do with the gravity of the situation, especially. And yet like, yeah, you're kind of like making up these small, I was genuinely really cold and I did need to buy some clothes, but like, I realized I was like, oh, I get to buy some clothes. Like it's like, oh, this is like I gotta buy a parka. Like, and it was kind of like my little upper for the day or whatever. Like,
well, I think I think I've seen, because you sent me some photos.
Yeah,
that's the parka with the big furry hood
yeah, I mean, I grew up here, but like, and I did actually have my teenage coat for decades, but I sublet my apartment to somebody in 2020 when everything in New York was like outside during the winter, and I came back and the parka was not there anymore. So I'd lost like my kind of serious winter coat, and the one I had, which I thought of as like my warm coat for New York, but like is a joke. Like I was I was dying.
The winter is different, and these are truly like the coldest days of.
Yeah, I mean, so on Friday, the day of the general strike, when you saw those thousands of people out in the streets, the temperature was, and not wind chill, the straight up temperature was like minus 19 degrees that morning, and they were out there minus 10. which is even for Minnesotans cold. Like, I know like the pond hockey tournament was canceled last weekend for the weather. Like, but so it's cold. Yeah, it's just been really cold. And obviously a lot of people have been making jokes about like the Nazis invading Russia in winter. But, there is a sense of pride for sure in knowing how to navigate this weather and not letting it, like I think when Rene Good was killed, like there was a sort of initial response like, oh, nobody's going to react. Like it's the middle of winter. Like it's not going to be as big as 2020 or something. It's really different than 2020, obviously, but the way people are responding it's not street protest. There has been protests, but it's not street protest. It's this like really deliberate organizing, this kind of organized resistance, and mutual aid, that everyone here is just taking very seriously. Not everyone, but maybe, I don't know, everybody I'm talking to for sure.
Well, Is there anything that I did not ask you that I should have? And then I guess along with that, I would say, is there anything that you have experienced on the ground in Minnesota that you don't feel like is getting properly covered in the press? Like, are there things that you've seen that might have surprised you or that you wish more people were aware of?
I think, I think just like the depths of the police brutality, or they're not police, the brutality, I guess you see the willingness of it here and there, like somebody getting pepper sprayed in the face, but there's real disdain. There's no pretense of professionalism. Like
on behalf of ICE, you mean the ICE agent?
On behalf of ICE, like real disdain for the people here, which is just, I feel like I realized that in 2020, like people just don't really have trouble computing that somebody in uniform can be so, so brutal. I don't know. I think a lot of us are taught to trust authority in it. And especially somebody that's more conservative minded, it's hard to believe. It's hard for them to believe that a person representing the government is out to hurt people. But that does seem to be what we're seeing here. And it's not me trying to be edgy to say that, or me trying to be melodramatic, or I think that's what we're seeing, and it's really scary. And then, like, I guess, just the idea that it's like a committed group of activists that are doing this, that's like hardcore or something. It's just not. It's like the same people that would like, go help out somebody that's had a death in the family, or like, normal, or do stuff at their church, or sing in a choir, or plant trees, like all anybody that's kind of volunteer minded in that way in the city right now is orienting their activities, I think, toward helping people who are too scared to leave the house, helping people who are more vulnerable, like, observing the movements of ICE. And it comes from a place of like real resistance to the idea that their neighbors that might have been born in another country are not their own people.
Well, I'm glad you're there, like, as a reader, and thank you for covering it and for taking the time to talk with me. Stay safe, stay warm with your new parka. And
I'm so happy. I love it. I got like fleece lined pants. I'm good now. Anything can happen, and I got it.
All right, Emily. Well, take care of yourself, and my thanks again.
Okay. Thank you, Brad. Take care.
All right, there we have it. That was Emily Witt talking with me from Minneapolis, where she has been covering the ICE raids, the civil disobedience, the protests, the general strike, the killings of Rene and Alex Pretti, all of it. Just the mayhem that has been unfolding in the streets of Minneapolis for the past couple of weeks. Emily is, again, a staff writer for The New Yorker magazine, a superb journalist, and the author of several books, most recently an award-winning memoir called Health and Safety, which, if you haven't read it, I recommend it. It's really great. So my gratitude to Emily Witt for making time to speak with me on short notice as she covers this story in Minnesota, which is, of course, her home turf. That's where she was raised. And I hope it was illuminating. I hope it brought some insight and, gave you maybe a little sense of commiseration. So many of us are watching this and trying to make sense of it. And it's deeply upsetting, but it's also galvanizing. I've got to believe it's bringing people together, and it is strengthening our will. So, again, thanks to Emily, and don't forget to subscribe to this show wherever you listen. Hit the subscribe button. Follow me on Blue Sky and Instagram. Sign up for my weekly newsletter over at Substack. Emily Witt, incidentally, has a Substack of her own. You can find her online at emilywitt.net, and I think you can follow her on Instagram, if not elsewhere. Definitely on Instagram. If you want to join the Other People book club or get an Other People t-shirt, you can do all of that stuff at otherppl.com. Don't forget to check out deepdive.audio for some great writing courses. Audio courses available to stream online or via the Deep Dive app over at deepdive.audio. And if you have a couple of minutes and you want to do me a quick favor, I would really appreciate it if you would rate and review this program wherever you listen. It helps the show find new listeners. All right, so this is a special episode. I'm just dropping it into the feed. The regular schedule, insofar as there is one, will continue unimpeded. So you'll be getting new author interviews, a new episode of the Brad and Mira Show. All of that stuff is in the works, so stay tuned.